It has become increasingly obvious to those who have eyes to see and ears to hear that we are living in unprecedented prophetic times. What many people aren't aware of is that so much of what is happening today relating to Russia, China, the Middle East, Israel, Iran, Turkey, all of it was prophesied many years ago, in some cases decades ago, with such unbelievable accuracy that it would be unwise to not pay attention to these things. We are attempting to navigate through those prophecies as best we can, and it's no secret that our worldview here at Z Media and our reporting is done through a Christian lens. There is an incredible resource available to us which goes through what we think could be events that are imminent, and the person we wanted to join us to discuss these things is Dr. David Patrick Harry, a former New Age believer of sorts, if I can summarize his prior beliefs that way, who came to know the truth and now runs one of the most informative geopolitical and world event channels, all done through the lens of true Christianity. Patrick joins us for a deep dive into a timeline of prophecies of our time, including the coming war, what has been fulfilled, what is in progress, and what is yet to be fulfilled, so that we know what to expect, right after a short word from one of the sponsors who make our independent reporting possible. Don't go anywhere. Z Media is proud to partner with Aussie businesses that support freedom and believe in you and your family getting the best possible nutrition you can. Stockman Steaks is a third-generation family meat business supplying direct from freedom-loving Aussie farmers with pasture-raised, non-genetically modified, humanely raised local meat. Their meats are guaranteed mRNA-free. That's right, no mRNA in these grass-fed, antibiotic, hormone-free animals. By buying from Stockman Steaks, you'll be supporting Aussie farmers who share your values and are committed to giving you the best quality meat. Head to their store to see their delicious range of carefully selected meat boxes or create your own. Visit stockmansteaks.com.au/Maria. Support businesses that support us and give your family the nutrition they deserve. Dr. David Patrick Harry, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's really great to finally do this. I know we spoke some time ago about doing a stream like this, but we're going to be having some very interesting discussions today, including the timeline of prophecy, which I recently introduced to a dear friend of mine who was quite surprised. Let me tell you, Patrick, are you familiar with Michael Yon?
I am not familiar with Michael Young.
Yeah, on air, I told him about the Bosphorus Straits, and he was like, how did monks know about that? So, so very, very interesting. But before we get into all of that, I'd really, really love for you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, a bit of your history, what you used to focus on before you became Orthodox, what drew you to the church, and then I want to touch on transhumanism. But let's start with a bit of your history.
All right. So my name's David Patrick Harry. I have a PhD in religious studies from the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. And I grew up kind of conservative Methodist, if you will. And then by the time I hit college, the naivete of the Christianity I grew up with quickly diminished and was introduced to like the introduction to world religions. I remember I took a course on the Bible and was introduced to all the critical scholarship, multiple authorship theories, seeing the parallels between the Epic of Gilgamesh and Noah and all this different stuff. And I was still interested in religion, but certainly I wouldn't identify as Christian at that point. And during the undergrad, I was studying religious studies and biology, spent 2 summers in southern China studying Mandarin, and was very interested in East Asian traditions, really Eastern mysticism. And that coincided with me getting into Terence McKenna, Alan Watts, Timothy Leary, Robert Anton Wilson, and really diving into what I'd call psychonautic spirituality, basically psychedelic culture, where psychedelics are perceived to be the leading edge of all religious experience and phenomenon. And then that led me to my master's degree at the University of Illinois, which was focused on shamanism in the tribal setting. I worked with a Native American scholar, and then early Christianity. I was very interested in Hermeticism, Gnostic sects, the 48 books in the Nag Hammadi that aren't in the canonical scriptures. And knew I wanted to go get a PhD, initially I applied to study people who were spiritually but not religious. And at that point, I would probably describe myself as that spiritually but not spiritual but not religious, with a a keen fascination with psychedelics, and ended up getting accepted at the GTU in Berkeley. And went there. Thought I was kind of at the top of the world. Berkeley, certainly the epicenter for psychedelic countercultural initiatives. And that first semester, I came across a book actually called The Psychedelic Gospels. Um, I have it around here somewhere, and it's written by Dr. Jerry Brown, in which he shows how these frescoes that emerge in Germany, Italy, parts of France, even in modern day Turkey, at that time would have been Byzantium, but appear to demonstrate that Adam and Eve are eating some type of mushroom. And so the author was speculating that this was part of a esoteric history of the Eucharist. Now, I was a non-believing Christian at the or non-believing, not Christian at the time. I was psychedelic, spiritual, kind of new agey, really, and did my own research into this book and came to the conclusion that it was ultimately a Gnostic heresy, that this was not some depiction of the historic Eucharist, but really a novelty that emerges through, we would call them the Cathars. And they were influenced by the Bogomils, a Gnostic group in Bulgaria, the Paulicians in Armenia, and dove deeper and deeper and saw that all these strange things regarding psychedelics, weird sexual rites, even homosexuality, orgiastic activity, all these could be found in these various competing sects, these Gnostic sects in the early Christian church. And I thought, well, it's interesting. Still, I'm non-Christian, a non-believer. So I took a PhD course on the history and theology of the Eastern Orthodox Church. Knowing that they have all this iconography, I thought, well, I'm finding these psychedelic mushroom frescoes in the West. I bet I'll find them in the East. And did not find any in the East, but I was exposed to the Orthodox phronema, if you will, just a Greek term for the mindset, the mentality, the theology. I was reading church fathers, modern theologians, and just the history of, and the unfolding of Byzantium, and found it fascinating. By the end of the semester, I was telling people, I'm not into religion as a practitioner, but if I was to become religious, the theology articulated by the Orthodox Church is a form of Christianity I'd never heard. It was intellectually satisfying. It had aesthetics, not just visually, but again, intellectually, the way that the whole worldview harmonizes together and appeals to so many things that if you are a more skeptic or a philosophical thinker, intrigued you. There is a true harmony in the theology itself, and that weighed on me. Where by the time that going through that summer and then entering into the last fall semester, I actually began praying and going back to churches. And first church I went to was Holy Virgin, where St. John of Shanghai, his reposed body is in San Francisco. And so I got introduced to a very beautiful Orthodox church, Orthodox liturgy. And from that point forward, was convinced that if I want to continue to pursue what it felt like is this new relationship with Christ, that the only option is the Orthodox Church. And so during that time, John Cyril, who's probably the most famous philosopher still living, he'd been tenured at Berkeley from the 1960s, these famous back and forths with Derrida and Foucault, all these French postmodernists. During the mid 20th century, he actually got fired while I was there in Berkeley for apparently asking a woman who was younger than him, I think she was in her like mid 40s, out to dinner. And that was considered a form of sexual harassment because of his prestige and his position in the university. And so when they fired him, he ended up teaching at the Dominican school, one of the philosophically oriented schools there in the GTU. And I just came to the realization, if they can fire John Cyril, and he explained the situation to the class, well, they can fire anybody. So that's when I decided to take my interest and create a YouTube channel called Church of the Eternal Logos, which is the main YouTube channel I run. I have another one titled Dr. David Patrick Harry, where I basically just take orthodoxy, and I became Orthodox in 2019, and then talk about history, philosophy, cultural events, whatever it may be, what through the prism of what I refer to as logos theology, this core structure of the Orthodox worldview and the church's position on Christ, on the world, on creation, on humanity, on all these different things. So that's what I've been doing. I ended up finishing my PhD and wrote a book called Return to Babylon From Adam to Antichrist, which I would argue is the ultimate Christian critique of transhumanism. So it took me about 2.5 years. It's very academic. It's an intellectual, historical approach in which I show that the presuppositions of transhumanism actually arise in Western Christendom around the medieval period. So, generally speaking, the 800s, and we see from John Scotus Regina moving forward this idea that what man can create by means of technology will restore what Adam lost after the fall. And this was a worldview that did not exist in the East. And so the West, not all of it, but certainly sections, major movers and shakers, um, propelled this ideology that if the West was going to redeem the New Jerusalem, they're going to do so through their own existential use of technology, which they believed was a divine right. So, all knowingness, all the attributes that Adam was associated with, immortality, all this stuff was going to be attained through technological advance. And so I trace that in chapter 1 to today, to modern day Silicon Valley, highlight the religious orientation of transhumanism, and then compare that with theosis, the doctrine of deification or sanctification and orthodoxy, to demonstrate what my general argument is the West stands at a precipice between two roads. There's really two ultimate narratives in the West regarding deification: transhumanism and general Gnostic hedonism, and then Orthodox theosis, an engagement with the uncreated energies of God and be in unifying with God through that mystery. So I demonstrate how transhumanism not only arises from the Christian West, but is actually the alternative theory for deification. We've already seen the Catholic Church sort of hint at sentiments that are very positive towards AI and where the future may go regarding technology. This is not found in the East because the instantiation of the physical human person, the biological person, is actually divine. That's how we unify with Christ, because he had the same form. So, therefore, this is a spiritual battle, in my argument, to destroy the image of God in man so that he is remade in the image of the technology that he has created. And so that's kind of the precipice of the premise of the book, is that from Adam all the way to Antichrist, we can see this general ideology that technology is going to redeem and save us. So that's a long-winded intro into who I am and what I do. I apologize, but I hope that suffices.
No, that's quite all right. I was planning on bringing this up later, and I will again, but I want to show everyone your YouTube channel. Church of the Eternal Logos is where you need to go. Patrick's broadcasts are extremely informative, and he looks at everything through the lens of orthodoxy and prophecy, which we are going to detail a little bit soon. Not a little bit, we're going to go into detail. But I've often made the case, Patrick, that it is impossible to be a true geopolitical analyst unless you're looking at things through the lens of prophecy and the word of God. Reason being that first of all, God knows everything, and these futile attempts of man to assess the state of the world without looking at what God has said about it is, I think, futile, like I said.
Right. Yeah.
But also the transhumanism angle, and when you look at, I mean, this is something that I've been researching for years now, biodigital convergence and all of these attempts to elevate man to this state of being all-knowing, as you describe, the connecting mankind to the hive mind, digging into the actual religious beliefs of Silicon Valley. Very important to us to understand that, because if we're going to let people like this lead us into the future, we must understand what their beliefs are. And for people to claim that they're just atheists is very, very naive. They're not. They absolutely have religious beliefs. And what I'm interested in to hear from you is how you think this war may be actually accelerating that process. For example, and I'll just give one, I haven't seen a single government say we need to pause data center construction or impose energy restrictions on data centers, yet you pleb over here start taking less showers.
Right. Yeah. No, there's no stopping the data centers, and the global elite are all on the same page. Regarding the religious beliefs, there's literally explicit religious groups, of which are very prominent figures within the transhumanist community, that describe this as the religion of the future, that
Mhm.
this is going to be the one religion, whereas every religion before has myths. Transhumanism will be the only religion that the myths are made tangible, that you'll be able to physically see and witness the miracles that the technology will provide.
Mm.
And yeah, right now we're in a essentially what appears to be is the beginning of World War III. There's been a war since 2012 between Ukraine and Russia, which was really a war between Russia, NATO, and the US. And now we're obviously in the midst of a war that's heating back up between the United States, Israel, and Iran. So all of this is, interestingly enough, setting the stage for what a lot of the saints and elders of the church have spoke about. But technology in specific, I mean, as soon as Donald Trump took the presidency, I think one of the first major acts he did, this is still in January of 2025, was what's called the Stargate project, which
Day
is a
two.
$500 billion investment so that the US wins the AI battle.
Yeah.
Now, again, we can get into whether AGI is even possible. I don't believe it is, because I believe that sentience, true self awareness, is actually part of being made in the image of God and is tied with having a soul. So, no AGI, no machine that, yes, it can recognize patterns, which is technically what we refer to as IQ. But just because something can recognize patterns at an exceptional scale does not mean it's self aware or sentient. And so, it seems like the powers that be are already trying to set the stage for these technologies to begin to take over. I mean, we've already seen Palantir, Israel in their genocide against the Gazans, at least in my perspective, have been using Palantir. Palantir CEO has been talking about how successful they've been. Palantir, of course, is talking about using these same metrics here in the United States, which we probably assume they already are. JD Vance, the vice president, who is obviously has a deep history with Peter Thiel and a lot of Silicon Valley, has argued what I suspected before Trump won in 2024, was that the right wing is going to use AI, Palantir, and these excessive surveillance state technologies in a way that are in favor of conservative ideals. So if you don't like mass immigration, well, we need Palantir so that everybody can be tracked. You don't like people committing crimes that we can't find. Well, we need cameras that can face track every person who walks by, any street corner, anything like that. You don't like fraud. You don't like the Somali fraud in Minnesota. Well, we need a digital currency that can be surveilled centrally by the U.S. government. So it's interesting that JD Vance is putting out talking points that are moving in the same direction, whether it be Sam Altman or Larry Ellison or Peter Thiel, Elon Musk. It's the same general trajectory. It's just the rhetoric around why it should be done is different.
Mm.
And you look at what's happening in the Middle East in general, it's a destabilization of the world, which if you're going to institute a new structure, a new order, you have to destabilize the one that existed. And this is where it's, there's a lot of debate what the ultimate purpose is of everything that's going on, whether it be with Russia and Iran, the global energy markets, all this stuff. And of course, the US dollar is in a very difficult situation, especially with the petrodollar being undermined right now by Iran and some of the BRICS nations. So it seems like the powers that be have already agreed on where the future is going to go. And that's part of what the war feels like. That's part of what World War III feels like. Now, at the same time, China's already instituted it. So this is more murky and more nuanced than just black and white, this side good, this side bad. Um, in China, they already have a surveillance state. So it's not like they're fighting against it. And in America, it certainly feels like that's where we're moving very quickly. In Europe, they're already putting in measures to do exactly that.
Yes, I describe it all as the infrastructure of the beast system.
Yes.
If you imagine the time, 20 years ago when you told people there'll be a mark where you can't buy or sell without it, just 20 years ago, you would have thought, well, how will they actually manage something like that? But today, when you look at the blockchain and you look at programmable digital currency, whether it be a CBDC or otherwise, I mean, all digital currency is susceptible to programming.
Right.
When you look at digital IDs and things of this nature, which we're already under a de facto digital ID, it just hasn't been
Right.
formalized. All of this points to the ability, or them to restrict your ability to buy or sell unless you comply. And of course, this comes with so many other things. The new CDC director pick, the queen of vaccine mandates, she's been dubbed.
Hmm.
This is why the vaccine agenda never went anywhere, because that's essential for their gene editing program, for their merging
Right.
humans with AI program.
Right.
And if you resist, I saw Elon talking about universal high income again, and of course, it was interesting, Patrick, because there was a flood of accounts talking about how great this is now, and I thought, okay, this is the next operation. They're obviously getting ready for this, because once
Right.
people are out of work, for two reasons, AI and the war, there will be no income for them. They're more likely to accept a digital currency that's doled out by the government in order to not starve. Desperate people
Right.
accept really, really unwise things when it comes to being able to feed your children. We saw that during COVID, except this will be worse. And so
Right.
everything is escalating towards that point where you are under that total surveillance at all times, big brother beast system. And the war, knowingly or unknowingly, I think knowingly, is accelerating us to that point.
Right. And the UBI is essential for transhumanism, right? This is where these agendas coincide directly. I highlight it in my book ad nauseum is that almost every person you can highlight as a major transhumanist talks about how the future is a future of human flourishing in which you have no work. You have no real responsibility. You get to choose and do whatever you get to want to do each day. So if you want to wake up and paint flowers, well, the UBI will take care of that. So everything will be paid for, and you can just enact your human ascension, if you will. Well, again, that is from a Christian perspective. What happens when Adam and Eve are forced to leave the garden? Well, Adam has to toil, he has to labor. It's part of his own working out of his own salvation. It's part of the burden of sin in which we bear. And women, they have to have children and they have labor pangs. Well, what is the transhumanist future? Men don't work and women don't give birth because, as I highlight, there's a whole strand, what's called post-genderism, which is about these synthetic wombs using in vitro fertilization and various technologies, CRISPR, gene editing, that you can have perfect babies. And I highlight multiple scholars, both transhumanists and post-genderists, that say in the future, sex will just be for pleasure. All reproduction will actually be done in a laboratory so that we can make sure that it's, up to specs, if you will. So we can make sure they're not going to have certain diseases or Down syndrome or predisposition towards this or that. And so reproduction will be entirely managed by essentially the technocracy. And this is something where you see the infusion of OnlyFans and pornography in the West. They're already conditioning us to move there. That sex is really about pleasure. Sex is about hedonism. Sex is about experience. Sex is not about family and it's not about reproduction, which is the historical understanding. And so again, you can see that the what seemed to be positive outcomes, maybe again, depending on how you view it, a UBI, a universal basic income, at essence, though, is in opposition to the ways in which God wants men and women to orient themselves in the world, that we must work. Man isn't complete without some sort of labor. And women aren't complete without some sort of family and child rearing or some type of nurturing element. Obviously, a minority of women can't get pregnant, but they're not diminished by the church. But that idea, the societal role, the function, and we're seeing all of that shift.
Yeah, they're doing absolutely everything they can to rewrite creation in their own minds.
Yes.
And of course, it doesn't it doesn't, but much of the world will be enamored by a lot of this, particularly when they reach a point of desperation, as this war will lead them to.
Yes.
And I think that, certainly our audience is aware, but there are so many people out there who have no idea what's coming, Patrick. And I'm
Hmm.
very, very concerned for them. I genuinely am, because as many of the saints said, uh, and I really want to direct people, if you've missed this interview with Conrad, where we did End Times Prophecies of the Elders and Saints, really want to encourage people to watch that. I'm going to link it in the description below as well, because we go through, all the way decades ago, talking about the supercomputers that would see everything
Hmm.
that we do, and talking about as well the little compromises that we make, which actually weaken us in the future when it's time to stand against the mark, for example. So it's important that we're exercising both physical and spiritual muscles in this time, making decisions that help us to remain strong against compromise in the times that are coming. And we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end. But to me, it's very clear, Patrick, that this war is, again, knowingly or unknowingly, I think knowingly, accelerating us to the point of this great reset.
Yes.
And I think that it's a good idea to go through some of these prophecies with everyone to see what
Hmm.
has already happened, what is still to happen. Now, tell us a little bit about the Eschaton Vigil, please.
The Eschaton Vigil is a Orthodox non-for-profit that I work with. It was actually founded out of my men's group. So I run a men's group called Logos Academy on school.com. It's mostly Orthodox, but it's a men's only community, and we have private discussions. We go over books. Right now, we're working through the Orthodox Survival Course by Father Seraphim Rose. We got two more chapters of that. And one of the gentlemen, this was probably 2 years ago, was really getting into some of the eschatology, and we kept noting that none of it really was ever translated into English. Very, very few resources. There was a couple books, but they're very thin. And so he decided to make it a mission to translate what he found as some of the most important eschatological texts in Russia, in Greece, in Serbia, in Romania, and that's what he's been doing ever since. Over the last couple of years, he's come out with multiple books. It's the first time ever many of this stuff has ever been translated into English, and it's really come at the perfect time because many of these works were already done before the June 2025 attack on the nuclear facilities of Iran. And so the first major domino to fall was everybody anticipating when Israel was going to strike the nuclear facilities of Iran. Metropolitan Neophytos of Morphu, who is in Cyprus, has really been I would say, the global spokesperson for orthodoxy in regards to a lot of these prophecies because he actually knew St. Paisios and St. Porphyrios and Elder Ephraim and many other saints from Mount Athos. And he grew up with them. Well, he started making content, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, on YouTube at the request of some of the elders that he start putting these ideas out into the public. And he highlighted that he believed the unfolding of these events began with the Russian Ukraine conflict. So he argued that 2022 was the first real domino um, in regards to the unfolding of these events that had led to and were precipitated um, to lead to the Israel and U.S. attacking the nuclear facilities. Then, so many of the other aspects that, if we went through the timeline, have already come to pass, such as the Russia Georgia war that was referenced by Elder Athanasius of Evia, Turkey blocking the Euphrates. This was done in about a decade ago. They reduced the flow of the Euphrates by like 80%. And there's a prophecy about the Euphrates drying up. Actually, by St. Paisios. He says, when you hear the Turks are cutting off the waters of the Euphrates, then know that we have already entered the preparation for the Great War. And so, talking about eschatology, first of all, I always want to highlight that we're Orthodox. So we do not do eschatology by pontificating on events, timelines. This is going to happen here. the way that all this eschatological prophecies have come to us is that we believe that certain elders and saints who are filled with the uncreated energies of God are given access to knowledge and wisdom that we don't have. And then they give us essentially signposts saying that if this is to happen, this is what that means into the future. We don't know when it's going to happen because, from our worldview, the collective repentance of Orthodox Christians, but also the global community itself, pushes back these events. And so everything regarding eschatology and the
Or
eventual
alters the
coming of Christ.
outcome, by the way. Maybe some
Yeah.
things will happen and others won't. It all really depends on our repentance. And I'm so glad you said that, because it's really important. Some of what we're going to go through today is pretty heavy, but
Yeah.
it's really important to note that our repentance really does matter here.
Hmm.
And things may not quite go as devastatingly as is foretold if we do repent. And as you said, it's not just the Orthodox Christians. It really is the whole world coming to
Yes.
that point, the end of ourselves, I suppose, where we just say, we cry out to God and say, right, I need to change. What do I need to do? How do I come back to God and to the truth? And for us, obviously, that is the Orthodox Church, the first church. And I really, really encourage people to learn more about that. We have a lot of Protestants and people from, all faiths
Mm.
in our audience, Patrick. So it's important for people to hear that message. But I do want to take us to that itinerary of the faith page. So this is at eschatonvigil.org/timeline. We're going to put that in the description for people as well.
Hmm.
And you can see here, as Patrick was talking about, how the first major signal here was that the US and Israel launch a major strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. That was the prophecy, and then we saw that. So Elder Theodore of Crete said, "Dear children, you will be drinking your coffee when you hear that the Jews have struck Persia's nuclear program. Then great events will begin." At the same time, or around the same time, keeping in mind that the way that time is calculated, for us is different to
Right.
the prophecies. Erdogan will fall. These will be the signs you must watch for, the indicators that momentous things are underway. And this is going all the way back to 2016. My understanding is that there were also earlier prophecies about this, Patrick.
Hmm.
But we already see there's been discussion about how Turkey is the new Iran, and they're going to
Yep.
start with Turkey soon. So it looks like Erdogan is shortly on his way out.
Right. And that's what I always tell people regarding this topic, especially Orthodox Christians, is one, if you're prone to anxiety, this isn't a topic for you. This is not necessary for your salvation. This is useful information. Other clergy, other figures in the church are speaking about this regularly. But if you're prone to anxiety, maybe this topic isn't for you. But in regards to Erdogan, uh, it seems like Turkey is already in the crosshairs of Israel. As you said, 2 weeks before the Iran war began, we started to get word from various representatives of the IDF and the Knesset in Israel, even Netanyahu, highlighting that the
Naftali
next
Bennett.
enemy,
Yeah.
yeah, the next enemy after Iran is Turkey. Now, to the rest of the world, they would wonder what, how, why Turkey? Well, for us Orthodox, we've actually been preparing for this. And I always warn people that the next big domino to fall, I mean, the nuclear facilities have already been attacked, is the stepping down of Erdogan. Now, we don't know if that is a resignation, if that is an assassination, if that is an overthrowing. The only thing that we are expected or expecting as Orthodox Christians that the Kemalists, the Western pro-secular party and faction of the Turkish government, will take control and will align Turkey with Western interest. Now, historically, Turkey, at least for the last, let's say, 30, 40 years, Turkey and Russia have had pretty friendly relationships. And this whole great war, which again, just for the timeline, anybody listening, from the Orthodox perspective, the arrival of Christ is again a known unknown date, is at a different point in which the Great World War begins. There's actually considerable years in the timeline between these events. So unlike people that believe in the rapture or anything, it's not just condensed and all these events are happening at once.
But
We
John
believe
Hagee just said that we got to build the third temple so Jesus can come back.
So did Hegseth in 2018.
Yeah.
Hegseth said he wanted to start a global religious war in 2018 to build the third temple. And that's actually another difference. The Catholics don't believe that the third temple will ever be built, whereas the Orthodox, we do believe that the Jewish third temple will be built. That's a distinct eschatological difference between the two traditions. And we get that from the elders. So it's not like we just haphazardly made a decision as the church. It's what the elders and the saints have said. Um, but so there's the Great World War, then there's a golden period for Orthodoxy, and then we start getting into the rise of Antichrist, a sort of tribulation, if you will, where he reigns, and then eventually the ending of that and the coming of Christ. We don't know the exact period that's going to take place, but the Great World War, which is really what we're focused on today, is very separate from the second coming of Christ. But all these events are in the box of the eschatological unfolding with the Orthodox Church. So Erdogan, it was, I remember coming across that quote 2 years ago, again in the Logos Academy, we were talking about, well, why would Turkey and Russia be against each other? Because the Great World War is really going to come into full fruition when Turkey blocks the Bosphorus Strait from Russia, from Russian ships that are trying to get into the Levant area to reach assets in the Middle East. Russia is then going to annihilate Turkey. We believe a third of the Turks will convert to Orthodoxy, a third are going to be killed, and a third are going to flee back into the Middle East. So I was wondering, in the group, we were like, well, Turkey and Russia are allies. How do we get to a point in which Russia is going to attack Turkey? And then the fall of Assad happened. And we saw that Erdogan and Turkey, despite the hatred and animosity between the two groups, also made an agreement behind the back of the Russians to divvy up Syria and allow the fall of Assad, which was an ally of the Russian Federation. So we already saw that rubbed Russia the wrong way, that Turkey already decided they're going to take annex sections of northern Syria. Israel takes sections of southern Syria. And then we can see, okay, now it makes a little bit more sense. There is some growing animosity between Russia and Turkey now. Once Erdogan is essentially a moderate. Within Turkey, you do have more extreme, more fundamental Islamic factions. But again, from the Turkish Revolution, in the 20th century forward, they're very secular. It's a different flavor. Turkey's a different flavor of Islam and culture than Saudi Arabia
Totally.
or so most people don't understand these differences, but Ataturk was very secular. And so the Kemalists, this party that I'm telling people is going to align Turkey with Israel, the United States, and NATO, which will be the one bloc, they are very secular and they're pro-Western. And so that is where a lot of eyeballs in the Orthodox world are focused to see what's going to happen to Erdogan. Now, could it be that Israel ends up taking it? Very much. We don't know what's going to happen or why he's going to no longer be the preeminent leader of Turkey, but something is going to happen. And we're already hearing commotion right now. There's people that are upset with Erdogan in Turkey because he didn't do enough for the Palestinians, that he's kind of talks a big game about Israel, but he doesn't do anything. Where others think he's almost too Islamic, the Kemalist Party. They think that because he's a moderate, that his base is more in the fundamental Islamic side. He appeals to them, although he doesn't enact the things that they wish he would do. And the Kemalists are in favor of like just doing away with this moderate Islamic facade and just move into a full-blown pro-Western, pro-NATO. They're already in NATO, but more explicitly aligned with those interests.
Another thing that just happened, I think, if I'm not mistaken, well, as at the time of this recording, within the last 48 hours, is significant tensions between Greece and Turkey in relation to the 12 miles.
Hmm.
And I heard from someone who's very familiar on this matter that this is probably the most serious escalation that they've seen thus far in relation to that. We also know that that's a huge signal when it comes to the prophecies. What do you know about that thus far?
Um, I I haven't read anything in particular about the escalation. I know that I don't know if there's any one event in general. Yes, the prophecies deal with the fact that right now there is a 6 nautical mile distance in which delineates Turkish territory and Greek territory. Now, obviously, there's already conflict because Turkey took parts of Cyprus. But St. Paisios has this interesting quote when he says, when you hear discussion about the extension from 6 to 12 miles, war follows immediately. And
So that just happened.
oh, it
So
did.
yes, yes.
So when did that happen? I did not see the article or anything about that.
As at the time of this recording, someone read it to me yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Literally a
Okay. So there
discussion
we
about
go.
12 miles. That was
So there we
what
go.
was
So
happening.
St. Paisios, and that was early 90s. So that is early 1990s that St. Paisios said this. At the time, again, it'd been hard to fathom what the heck he was talking about. But because of the extension of the 6 to 12 nautical miles, they will include islands, Lesbos, Rhodes, and there's another one I'm missing. Um, Anyways, there's three Greek islands that Turkey's going to basically take over and take away from Greece. That's going to cause the animosity between the Greeks and the Turks. Now, technically, those nations are on the same side of this battle, although that is a conflict within a conflict,
Yes.
and that will become physical. We're talking about full-blown military escalation between the parties, and this is leads into the eventual re conquest of Constantinople. And that because a third of the Turks will die, a third are flee, and a third are going to convert, some of which back to Orthodoxy, depending on their family heritages. Um, Constantinople, after this Great World War, which many Americans and Russians and Turks, Israelis are going to perish in, out of necessity, due to there being nobody there to actually man the city, it's going to be given to the Greeks. And this has been prophesied by the Greeks, I mean, for a long time. I'm not Greek myself, but I have Greek Orthodox friends that are deeply entrenched in the mythos and the legends and the prophecies that are unique. And each Orthodox nation kind of has their own. But the Greeks have been anticipating this. And it's interesting that if you said the nautical miles were just extended, that is something that we've been waiting on for a while, and it's all happening right now.
To be clear, not extended. There were, from my understanding, and I'll find out the exact text, or the exact news article, and I'll actually share that in Telegram. It was read out loud to me yesterday, and it was a discussion around, like an argument
Ah,
around, rather than 6 nautical miles, now it's 12. And so that is, and the person that was reading it to me, again, someone quite familiar with these prophecies, said this is the first time we've seen them actually speak in these terms, the most serious escalation we've seen, where we're talking now about 12 nautical miles. And it was the manner of the discussion. So I will get the exact text and share it in Telegram for everyone to see, because it is important. It's part of these prophecies. I want to bring up the back to the website. This is right near the top of the page. The markers identified in the prophetic tradition, most have now been confirmed. You have 15 fulfilled, one in the process of being fulfilled, and one pending. And you can see Turkey blocking the Euphrates back in 2018, the Russia-Georgia war in 2008, global economic crisis, which is fulfilled and ongoing. It's
yep,
kind of perpetual, in perpetuity until we reach the point of digital currency, I guess. And I don't think it'll
exactly.
ever really truly be resolved.
Right.
UK withdrawing from the EU, fulfilled in Feb 2020. Easter falls on May 5th. That was one of them. It says in the year when Easter falls on May 5, the events for the city will begin. That happened in 2024. Gaza destroyed and flattened. Listen to the accuracy of this from 1994. It says Palestine will be a stadium and the Dead Sea will be their grave. That was St. Paisios from 1994, a confirmation
Hmm.
there from the UN, 81% of structures are damaged. We also have Israel striking Iran's nuclear facilities. We spoke to you about that before. The Kurdish situation, Turkey will be dissected into 3 or 4 parts. The Kurds will take their own. That was fulfilled in March of 25. The axis of resistance collapses. That was Assad's rule that ended in 24. uh, the E65 road, that is a very interesting one. And, you know, it's really interesting, Patrick, because in the West, we don't really think about what's happening in Europe so much. But this
Right.
is important because these are clear markers that were given to us. The E65 road, the war will break out when the new road connecting Domoko with Lamia is completed. The final section is due in mid of this year, the middle of this
Right.
year. The 6 to
Yeah,
12 nautical
we just
miles.
checked up on that too.
Yes.
It's scheduled to be complete. So they already have the vast majority of it done. And why that's important, it has to do with the prophecies in regards to how do the logistics of these militaries mobilize and move during this great world war. And so it said, well, there's going to be a road, and the E65 is exactly what was being referred to. And it just so happens they again fit the timeline perfect and describes the exact area in which soldiers are going to enter.
Yes. Yes. So that's why it matters. All Westerners, we should be paying attention to these things. We have the 6 to 12 nautical miles. When you hear discussion about the extension from 6 to 12 miles, war follows immediately. And I'm saying from what I heard just yesterday that those discussions are underway. That was St. Paisios in 1994. Russia frames the war as a holy war. That was Russia is ordained by God to destroy the satanic state of Europe and America. They have actually said that.
Okay.
The World Russian People's Council declared invasion a holy war in 2024. Trafficking to be exposed. Well, we had that exposed majorly.
Yeah. Still ongoing.
Ongoing, right? Erdogan weakening. So, you know, his health and the threats on Turkey and all of that. Digital currency capital controls pending, and the blood moon trigger. After the red moon, it will all begin. The moon will burn crimson like a flame. We saw that, or that happened recently again.
Yeah,
So there have
last
been a
month.
few of those blood moons, and it just so happens that often something chaotic follows.
Yeah, the blood moons are important for some of the Jewish prophecies on regards to the first sacrifice and the implementation of building the third temple, of which they got to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque and all that stuff. So there's I think 3 years in a row in which there's blood moons, and at least from some rabbis, which you can't take the word of one rabbi and equate it to all of Judaism per
Of
se,
course.
but they viewed these as very significant, meaning that, and I think two of them have passed, and it may have been this past one in March was the last one or the middle of the three, that the rebuilding of the temple, the Greater Israel Project, all of that will commence during that period. And these are signs from God, from their vantage point, that they need to move forward with their objectives.
Yeah. This is another confirmation when three things take place. First, Gaza is leveled. Second, Iran's nuclear program is struck. And third, Erdogan falls. When the third happens, be ready. So this is, you know, I think the whole
That's
world
St.
should be
Gabriel of
watching.
Georgia.
St. Gabriel
Yeah.
of Georgia, that's right. And so everyone should be watching for these particular signs. That's why we're talking about Turkey so much. Um,
Yes.
I want to ask you about these 10 phases, one
Uh-huh.
sequence. The fall of Erdogan, Turkey attacks Greece, Russia destroys Turkey, destruction of America. We need to talk a little bit about that. World War III, betrayal of China. So let's talk about some of these phases. Let's start with the
Okay.
fall of Erdogan.
Um,
Anything we haven't really mentioned there?
I mean, we don't know how he's going to fall. As I said, and just as that last quote from St. Gabriel of Mount Athos, that two of the three signs in which they have been telling us, the saints, the elders, I mean, St. Paisios has been talking about these. He reposed in the mid 1990s. But we have been anticipating for probably about 30 years. Now they're all falling into place. Erdogan, as we said, there's a lot of people that could potentially be behind his dethroning, if you will. There's factions within the Turkish government. Israel has already put their crosshairs on the entire nation of Turkey, most specifically Erdogan. And Erdogan's been very outspoken since the Iran war started, drawing even more ire and being more antagonistic towards Israel
Yes,
in the
he
last
has.
few days. So
Mhm.
Could it be that he's on a diplomatic mission and his plane gets shot down? There's been questions, as you mentioned and referred earlier, is his health. Some people have speculated maybe he has cancer right now. And Metropolitan Neophytos said that we really don't know what will it be. We just need to be prepared. The day that Erdogan is no longer the leader of Turkey is is the point in which all three of these sort of early signs of the Great World War are now finally complete. So two of the three are obvious. The third one is really just waiting for when it's going to happen.
Yes. We also have here the Turkey attacking Greece, and we were trying to remember the islands there: Lesbos, Chios, and Rhodes. Their occupation will not last long, only 3 months, it says. A savage famine for 40 days is going to be part of that. So Cyprus will receive a slap from the Turks, but it will be temporary. Turkey will be erased, said St. Paisios. When the Turkish fleet reaches 6 miles, it will be destroyed. This will not happen by us. It is God's will. And of course, it says here, my children here in Greece, you will have a savage fast for 40 days. Banks will not be open. Shops will not be open. Nothing, nothing, nothing. So
Yes.
Greece should probably start preparing for that. But really, a lot of us, Patrick, I mean, knowing all of this and seeing all of this, we really should be getting prepared for these events.
Yes, and first and foremost, spiritually, right? So that's where if you're anxiety prone, your first instinct is like, I need to make sure I'm on my homestead and I got enough chickens and all this stuff. And it's like, well, not all of us are in those positions. And if all of this is real and we're really taking serious these prophecies and the direction and the instruction of the church, we need to get spiritually right. And whatever happens after that happens. What's in your control? I always try to tell people, like, especially talking about this topic, is what is in your control and what's out of your control. What's in your control right now is making sure that you repent, that you align yourself with Christ, that you go to church, that you do the things you need to do to be spiritually satisfied and aligned with Christ. From there, yes, then there's pragmatic things you can do. Absolutely. Um, Generally, try to make your life anti-fragile. If you're very dependent on something, become aware of what your weaknesses are. What if something were to go wrong? What do you need to do? Do you have grain stacked up, rice in case of canned goods, in case we can't get food and stuff like that? Now, Greece in particular is in a difficult position. And it seems like the powers that be have been already trying to experiment with the Greeks, especially in regards to these digital IDs.
Yes.
It's interesting that the EU wants to roll out their digital IDs more so, again, experimenting more with the Greeks than even other parts of Europe. Um, and again, the government seems to be going along with it. The Greek government has just legalized gay marriage, of which, of course, the clergy and the church is outraged about. So Greece is getting hit from multiple points right now. There's animosity with Turkey. They're getting bombarded with Muslim immigrants. I have friends that were just in Athens. They live just outside of Thessaloniki, and they're saying, "Yeah, we went to Athens. They're doing the call to prayer. First time in Greek history there you have public call to prayer in Athens.
Whoa.
That there was, it's believed that there's about 1 million Muslims there already. And of course, in Greece is the passageway into Europe. So a lot of these immigrants from Northern Africa, the Middle East, Turkey, Afghanistan, Pakistan, they typically move their way from Turkey into Greece, and then they get into Europe one way or another. But many are just setting up shop and just staying in Greece. So they're getting hit with the immigration, they're getting hit by the Turks, and then they're getting hit by the West and the powers that be into the implementation of the technocracy itself. Um, and Greece, and I, again, it breaks my heart to say this, but my wife and I were just there a couple years ago, and with the friends that I know that live there, there's a problem with Gen Z, generally speaking, because social media has created a sort of monoculture. And so if you travel around the world, I mean, you go to Greece or you go to Germany or you go to America or you go to, I assume, Australia or any of these first world nations, all the younger people, they dress the same, they look the same, they're consuming very similar things. And so, in the Greek context, many of my friends who are devout Orthodox Christians, and I've even heard clergy speak about this, they're very worried about Greece because the young people don't know their history. They're losing their Orthodox tradition, and they're almost encouraging the collapse in a way that they become more modern, more like the West, which is, spiritually is just, it's just terrible. I mean,
Tragic.
Greece, the heritage of Greece, and to see that. Um, Everything again as a Orthodox Christian going to Greece, the chapels, the churches, the prayer corners on the street. I mean, you have little and people have and the candles are lit. Somebody's taking care of the can. It's like it's so beautiful, and then to see that that is all being maintained by really the older generations, and the younger generation does not realize the heritage and the responsibility that they really have because you have thousands of years of ancestral history. I mean, if I'm an American, I'm kind of emancipated from history. It's like what 250 years, and I could identify with English history, but Greeks in Greece. I mean, my gosh, we're talking all the way back to Heraclitus and Socrates and Plato and all that stuff, and let alone Byzantium and the Orthodox Church. The language of the Gospels themselves. So Greece is in a difficult position, but that's where in these eschatologies, they're sort of reified once they retake Constantinople. They kind of reclaim their identity. And that's part of the problem right now in Greece is what is their identity? They're not, they're unique in the European context because they're Orthodox, but the powers that be seem to be doing everything they can to make them more and more and more like the West and
Yes.
doing away with the unique attributes that identify Greece as it is.
And adversely, what's happening in the West is more and more people are converting to Orthodoxy. More and more
The
people
irony,
are,
right?
right. Like more and more people are saying world is crazy. What's the truth Christianity? I'm getting Bible verses from Mark Levin on Fox News. Something's wrong here. He was quoting Revelation the other day, Patrick. He was
Yeah.
quoting Revelation telling us that Jesus wants war in Iran or something. Like it's
Hegseth.
just insane.
Yeah, well, Hegseth quotes Pulp Fiction.
Yes, yep, yeah, we have that as well. So, I mean, in the West, people are looking at the madness and saying, what is the truth? What is the first church? And they're finding orthodoxy. I want to quickly update because I checked while you were talking, I did a quick search. So, this is discussions both that happened in March and April. This is a development actually from April. So, probably what you and I were just talking about before. Greece reiterated its sovereign right to extend its territorial waters up to 12 nautical miles, citing
Mm.
the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And Greece rejected Turkish challenges regarding these maritime zones. So Greece is saying, Turkey is saying that the 12-mile expansion is a red line that would restrict its maritime access and violate its interests, saying that they'll go to war over it.
Mm.
But Greece has proceeded with creating marine parks and planning for expanded territorial waters, with Foreign Minister George Gerapetritis, apologies, I butchered that, stating in January of this year that the 12-mile extension in the Aegean will happen similar to previous actions in the Ionian Sea. But as of April 2026, Greece reiterated its sovereign right to those 12 nautical miles. So those
Mm.
discussions are absolutely happening. I just wanted to update
Interesting.
everyone with that. Yeah, it is interesting indeed. Okay, let's keep going through these phases. Russia
Hmm.
destroys Turkey. Now, again, I don't want to see any nation destroyed. I don't want to see
Right.
any people suffer. And I really do believe that this all depends on our repentance. Nonetheless, we're presenting to you what the prophecies say. When the Turks close the straits, specifically the Bosphorus, World War III will come. Many people feel like we're already there, but we're talking about it being extremely apparent. Russia
Mm.
invades through the Caucasus, Turkey destroyed in 1 week. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, the general divvying between these parties that be in the Great World War is Iran, China, Russia, which all three of those are already aligned, makes sense. The other side is Turkey, NATO, EU, Europe, whatever, America, Israel. I already see those signs generally lined up. When Turkey blocks Russian passage through the Bosphorus, which again, they think of the territory and how important Sevastopol is in southern Ukraine and Crimea, which Ukraine or Russia has gone out of their way to reclaim, which has historically been part of the Russian Empire. But when they block Russian naval passage, Russia is going to unleash absolute fury on them. And as it says here, they're going to come down through the Caucasus region. So we're talking about Georgia, and that's why one of the earlier points that was mentioned in the itinerary, the things have already been fulfilled, is the Russia-Georgia war.
Yes.
That has already happened. That was prophesied, and there's quotes by St. Gabriel of Georgia all about that and what Georgia's role is going to be. And Georgia, even though they have deep animosity towards Russia, they will be able to retain their Orthodox identity and their national identity throughout all this. But the Russians are going to come through the Caucasus region, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and that's where they're going to be surrounding Turkey, both from the north navally and then on land terrestrially on the eastern flank there through the Caucasus region. And there's quotes about there's going to be so much bloodshed that, calves, meaning small cows, newborn cows will be floating in blood and in the city of Constantinople and during all this stuff. So what's interesting though is, there's quotes about 200 million Chinese soldiers coming up to the Euphrates, which now, again, if they come through Iran, begins to make a lot more sense that Iran and their proxies have already instigated grasping territory there in Iraq. And of course, we know Hezbollah in Lebanon and all that stuff. But now with the Chinese-Iranian alliance, it makes sense that some of these Orthodox elders and saints talk about 200 million Chinese soldiers next to the Euphrates. Well, now we can begin to see how that could possibly happen. So the entire point of all this is that world history is shrinking and it's really just focusing right down towards the Middle East. That's where all of this is really going on. And in many ways, it's like history itself has been a spiritual battle for these lands by various people that be. I'm getting ready to do a stream on the Crusades from an Orthodox perspective. We view the Crusades from a very different vantage point than the Latin West. But with the Russia attacking of Turkey, Turkey's no longer going to exist. And Turks themselves are an amalgamation of a lot of people. There's a running joke that if you want to destroy Turkey, send them DNA tests because they're really just an amalgamation of many different people. The Turks, historically speaking, were nomadic. They were great on horseback. And when they defeated the men in battle, they would take the women and they would breed with them. And so Turks themselves are genetically, ethnically, a variety of people.
Yes, and a lot
But
of Europeans that were under their rule for 400, 500 years were originally blonde-haired, blue-eyed until they came
Mhm.
through. So there's that as well. Again, I don't want to see destruction of any countries. I don't mean to
No.
make light of this, but it's important that we sort of pay attention to these things and understand them. The other very alarming thing, people may be thinking, well, what of the West? I've seen prophecies that talk about Australia joining the war.
Hmm.
There will be great destruction that happens in Australia, from what I understand. And also the US, Father Peter, this is the next phase. Father Peter told me in a stream that we did, where it was April of 2024, if I'm not mistaken, where he actually said when Israel strikes Iran's nuclear facilities, and then he posted that snippet on YouTube. And after the strike happened, it was well over 1 million views because people are thinking, how did he know? Well, the saints knew. And
Right.
and in that stream, he told me that while the kinetic war wouldn't reach America, there would be disruptions like civil wars and many natural disasters as well that would
Mhm.
severely impact America. What do you know about these prophecies?
Yeah. So to wrap up, so once Russia annihilates Turkey, again, out of necessity, and historically, Russia being, if you believe in the Third Rome theory, is a global protectorate of all faithful Orthodox Christians. And so Russia is not going to be attacking Greece, despite them technically being on opposite sides. In regards to America, what is America's role in all this? Everybody wants to ask those questions, and many people being American converts are most curious. Well, Elder Ephraim had established 20 monasteries in North America, the most famous being St. Anthony's in Arizona, which is an Athonite styled monastery. Why did he do that? Why did he leave Mount Athos to come to America, a country he had never been to found 20 monasteries? Well, it has to do with these prophecies and the state of America moving forward. There's multiple quotes about America being the modern Sodom and Gomorrah, LA and New York City being modern day Sodom and Gomorrah, and that America will need to face judgment for what is it has exported to the world through Hollywood, technologies, American culture, all of it. And America, though, will not be attacked by foot soldiers. It's not like the Chinese are going to come down through Canada and they're going to attack us. As you know, it's the famous saying, I think the Japanese during World War II said, behind every blade of grass is a gun in America, that you can't just send troops in and conquer the American continent. But what's going to happen is an internal destruction. So we believe that a geological event is going to occur, a major, massive geological event. We don't know what it is. People speculate. Could be the famous volcano in Yellowstone that since I was a kid is being, we've always been told that if this thing goes off, it'd be absolutely catastrophic. Every year they talk about how the energy is building up underneath it. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's a tsunami. We don't exactly know, but what the saints have told Americans is to be watchful for a massive geological event and civil war that's going to be combined with the economic collapse, which is the dollar system, which we've already seen, which the collapse of the dollar system is going to be essential for digitizing money and putting it onto the new metric. So you can see how all of this is actually beneficial. If you wanted to create full-blown technocracy, everything we're saying is almost a prerequisite in regards to reinstituting new structures to do global commerce, economic stuff like that. So America hit with civil war, which we already see. We're in America, you can feel it. It's palpable. I mean, whether it be the immigration protests against ICE, whether it was George Floyd during the Summer of Love in 2020,
Whether it be America
whatever it may,
first or whatever the heck is going on right now, you
yeah,
know?
whatever it may be, you can already feel it, that there is this underlying tension within the United States, and we don't have a shared culture, right? I mean, the thing that was celebrated historically about America, I would say at least up into the 1990s, was that it was a nation built of a lot of different people, homogenous in the majority, but a lot of different immigrants from around the world, and they adapted to and adopted American culture, American way of life,
And
American
Christian
values. Well,
values.
yeah, it was Protestant Christian values, essentially. Those don't exist anymore. What's in sociology is referred to as the sacred canopy, that every group of people, every culture, every nation, it could be a city, whatever it is, what unifies a collective group of people is what's referred to as a sacred canopy. And that is your heroes, your myths, your religion, all of it is in a canopy in which people appeal to collectively to shape their identity. As we saw with during 2020, I mean, they're taking down statues of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, um, Robert E. Lee. So there is no sacred canopy in America anymore. There is not really one thing that unifies all Americans.
It's true.
And in that sense, we're already set for a civil war, because you can't really point to a thing in which to avoid the civil war we can all appeal back to as a sort of foundational identity and see ourselves on the same team.
And let me just say that conservatives that are, with other conservatives a lot may feel like they have a lot in common, but that's not the entire country, right? So I'm in Texas, in sort of central Texas, where you walk here and you feel like you've gone back in time 80 years because everyone's still beautiful and polite and cares about their neighbor, and it's incredible. But the whole country's not that way, and so there is a clear issue here with the values shared by your. Again, I don't believe in left-right politics necessarily. I think it's all a uniparty playing our differences off one another. But you do have far left ideology, people that want to mutilate children's genitals and all of that sort of stuff that exists. What can you have in common with these people? You can't. And even if you come together on one point, your ideal of how the world should be is so different, that you can't commune with people like this. And so it is, a lot of people expected that Trump would fix that. I think the divide has widened even further. People are furious with Trump, particularly about the ICE stuff and all that sort of stuff. So I mean, it doesn't seem to be coming together at all. And one thing I wanted to mention to you, other than of course through Christianity, one thing I wanted to mention to you, Patrick, it's interesting in regards to the geological event. And I've heard people talking about, and of course, again, I hope none of this ever happens. I want to keep reiterating that. But I've heard people talk about potential tsunamis. And what I
Hmm.
find interesting is when you look at the location of all of these data centers, well, a majority of them are in the center of the country.
Yep.
Now, these people who are orchestrating these world events absolutely study prophecy, particularly real prophecy, okay? And they plan accordingly. And why
Right.
is it that all the data centers, you think about it, you put a data center in the middle of the desert where there is already water restrictions? Why would you do that? Well, part
Right.
of that is making sure that you steal all the resources of the people and usher them into smart cities and everything. The other part is it's going to be safe potentially from geological events. So that's
Right.
something to just bear in mind, I think.
Well, I'm here in the Midwest. I live in Indiana, but Amazon and these data centers, they're all over the place. And so it's interesting that they're choosing places like the Midwest
Yes.
or, anywhere, I mean, Kansas, Nebraska is getting data centers. Like, why are they putting them all in these areas? To your point, because they're going to be safer.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
safer culturally as well, because people aren't at each other's throats as much here.
right,
There's that aspect as well. And then also destroying the culture of those places because you have a constant hum that you
exactly.
can't live by, so you have to move out. It's
Right.
multifaceted.
And that's what I was going to say about the civil strife in the United States. To your point, yes, the radical leftist progressive that can't identify a man or a woman, that's a problem. But let's just take, you're in Texas. I was just in Dallas, Fort Worth area. Go to Dallas.
Totally
Does it look like
different.
America? So
No.
you got leftist progressives, you have entire groups of Indians that are preserving their Indian culture. Houston's one of the largest hubs of the Chinese in the United States, more so than even San Francisco, which is historically associated. Um, so you have Hispanics, although they're kind of more of the fabric of the history of America. You
Yes.
could you could argue, but still, my point is, what unifies all these different groups of people? All these immigrants coming in. I mean, in Texas, for example, they were going to build the largest mosque in the country. They're going to build a Muslim-only community.
Yep.
And really, it looked like Greg Abbott only turned that down due to public outrage because he already made an agreement. And I believe his largest funder, political funder, is Pakistani.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so that's what my larger point about the sacred canopy, to your point, it's not exactly. If you think this is like Republican Democrat, like you're missing the whole point here. That's why, go listen to your Dan Bongino if that's what you want to hear.
Oh no, please don't.
Yeah.
Anyone but him. You know?
Yeah.
I get
your
I
Ben
joke.
Shapiro and all these people. It's always the Democrats, the Democrats. Well, it's
Yes.
not. It's larger. Like
Yeah.
we don't even have some of the basic elements of what forms a nation, and that's because multiculturalism and really the Enlightenment presuppositions that founded America are coming to a dead end. I mean, that's really what people are experiencing, and this is why I argue why people are turning to orthodoxy, trad Catholicism as well, but Catholicism's a dead end. I mean, they're trying to do away with the trad Latin Mass in the first place. But why are people returning back to these worldviews? I say they're pre-modern. So if you look at right wing, if you look at the people that are critical of things going on, things that we're talking about, what are their religious identities? Almost always some type of traditional form of Christianity, either trad Catholicism or Orthodox or paganism. You see all these Nordic pagans, the
Yes.
right wing pagans. Why are they doing this? I think it's a subconscious enacting of trying to get out of the problem of modernity. What is
Mm.
modernity? It's the Enlightenment belief that we're going to lead to utopia and create a utopian world civilization through the processes of individualism, rationalism, scientism, democracy, and technological progress. And that those five pillars were believed in the 1700s that if we just pursue those to their fullest degree, we're going to enter into utopia. And that's why America was viewed as the New Jerusalem. It's the second Garden of Eden. It's the point in which history was going to end. But now we see that all those presuppositions, which are uniquely modern, are collapsing on themselves. That individualism, we have more suicide and depression than ever before. There is no unified, again, notice religion wasn't part of any of that. So secularism, atheism, you have people, constructing their own identities and sexual orientations. So modernity feels like it's coming to its end point. And transhumanism is the attempt to salvage modernity. You see, transhumanism is, in regards to the technological feats, uniquely modern. Now, the ideology, I argue, is all the way to medieval. But transhumanism is the ultimate point in which modernity fulfills its end. Transhumanism is the telos of modernity. And that's why if you talk with Musk or Thiel or some of the philosophers, Nick Bostrom's a transhumanist philosopher, Max Moore, they'd say, yeah, we hate the postmodernists. Those people are retarded. You can't work with those people. They can't do anything. We are modernists. We are part of the humanist tradition. That's where transhumanism is. Now, the trans part is about posthumanism, right? They come out of this philosophical school called posthumanism. And that you have radical environmentalists that want to do away with humanity. These are professors that are in regards to, if you look up posthumanism, this is a real ideology. I'm not making it up. And within posthumanism, you have competing factions. Transhumans are one of the competing factions, and they against the other ones. So posthumanism is a decentering of the human subject as the point of all research and inquiry. Humanism is the Vitruvian Man of Da Vinci, where he has 4 arms, 4 legs. That is the recognition that man is the measure of all things. Transhumanism says we're fulfilling the humanism, but the fulfillment of humanism is man transcending his biology into an immortal technological man or entity. It's no longer gendered, it's no longer sexualized. So I think people at a subconscious level are being driven to look for something older. And that's what's also driving this inquiry into orthodoxy, because one, it's true. 2, it is it is the historical presentation of Christianity. And it gives you mysticism back. It gives you community back. It gives you God back. It gives you the things that modernity tried to do away with in favor of essentially Nietzsche's Übermensch.
That is so beautifully put. It's so true. It's so true. And it is the solution to modernity, all
Yes.
encompassing solution to modernity. And that doesn't mean you have to become a Luddite and not use a telephone, right?
Right.
That's not,
We are not Luddites. The church actually, unless you're monastic,
right.
it's a privilege there. But for laity, where I have so many quotes in my book of clergy saying, look, Orthodox, we're not Luddites,
Yeah.
because technology can't be evil because it doesn't have a will. So this gets back into our own anthropology and our theodicy, the explanation of evil. Evil can only be a willful turning away from God. So therefore, noetic entities, demons and angels, and us are the only things that can actually be evil, because we
Right.
are the ones that have a will. Technology is a neutral medium, but evil can use a neutral medium for demonic purposes. St. Paisios said the internet was going to allow orthodoxy to spread around the world, which it is doing.
And
He
was
was
right.
absolutely right. And he saw this in the 90s.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's happening. But at the same time, the same structure, because God can use all things for good and evil, is also creating the prison around us.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
regarding the,
Sorry, go
ahead,
on.
go ahead. I don't
Well, I just wanted to finish that thought, which was that on a spiritual level, and then the flow-on effects into your physical life. I was a Protestant for many years, Patrick, many years. I was actually born into Orthodoxy, baptized Orthodox, then as an adult became a Protestant for a period of time, and then returned to Orthodoxy. And I really do need to sort of publish that story. But, I always felt like something was missing. I always felt like, how is it that I can go to a service in the morning and then visit a sister church at night? Same verses, totally different message. I know the Holy Spirit's not a schizophrenic. What's going on here? This was what I was like really conflicted here. And then why is my understanding different to my pastor?
Right.
Which one of us is missing the Holy Spirit? Because we can't both have him. These were questions that really used to bother me. And the one thing that really was always weighing on me was what is Paul talking about when he talks about partaking unworthily of the body and the blood of Jesus, and what is considering the body and the blood of Jesus? And I found those answers within the Orthodox Church.
Right.
So I really encourage anyone who's listening to please inquire and, do more research into this. It is the first church. It is the true church.
Yes.
And it's so important, so important. And the reason why I talk about these prophecies a lot, Patrick, is I've always been someone interested in these things and eschatology. But when you see so many accurate prophecies, as opposed to your standard charismatic, the rain is gonna come and you're gonna get a flood, and it's like, what is that? That's not prophecy. That's
No.
nonsense. That's emotional, and
It's
it
Paula
hasn't.
White speaking in tongues.
That is what that is, actually. Paula White praying for babies that were conceived out of wedlock for God to kill those babies. I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
that was one
even
of
though
her
he's
prayers.
the one that gave them life. He's the one that breathed life into them.
What a lunatic of a woman. But you understand, they're not all like
Yes.
that, but the incorrect theology is always going to come when you have someone that believes they're led by the Holy Spirit, and all these people are going to these churches trying to figure out, well, who I go to this church because the word is good there. The word is good there. I used to hear that all the time, and I was someone who was constantly looking for, where is the word sound and solid? And that's just my assessment based on how I feel or what my thoughts are, what I think the Holy Spirit has revealed to me versus this person. Meanwhile, this person's convinced of the same.
Right.
It's confusion, and it's that is not the place that God wants us to be. And for anyone that wants to sort of learn a little bit more about this topic, I highly recommend Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future by Father Seraphim
Yes.
Rose. Jay
Mhm.
Dyer and I did a book review on that really incredible discussion in my early days of Orthodoxy. So I highly, highly encourage people to check that out. Now, I just want to get back to these
Yeah.
phases quickly. And
And
I know
let
that
me
we're,
pick up where you dropped off
yeah,
too
sure.
is um given the neutrality of technology, here's something that is very orthodox
Mm,
is that we do believe in magic,
mm,
right? So I would argue that Protestantism, because it is not sacramental, a lot of Protestants then enact their faith through, sacraments have to do kind of where God's divine will meets with matter, the material world. And Protestants, because they don't have real sacraments, voting in America is a sacrament. Participating in the political process becomes a sacrament. You're maintaining your belief system or identity or your sports ball team, it becomes sacramental in a way. Now, from an Orthodox perspective, with magic being real, we're talking about ritualistic magic. We're talking about the conjuring. We're talking about the naming of demons and exchanging energetically things for them to fulfill your desires. Magic is essentially using the spiritual economy around us for the manifestation of personal desires. It's a very rudimentary, simplified definition, but that's really what it's about. Now, building this massive AI system and these powers that be, talking about AGI and sentient AI and the AI God, which Yuval Noah Harari speaks about in Homo Deus, especially the last couple chapters of that book. Um, from an Orthodox perspective, it is conceivable that the only intelligence that is actually operating inside a global, let's say somebody wins the AI race, is actually a demon. It's
yes.
actually Satan himself. And so there's a whole book coming out of the ancient world called the Corpus Hermeticum. And it was translated for the first time during the Renaissance by Marsilio Ficino. And what it described is essentially Egyptian alchemy and magical understandings of the world. It's influenced by Neoplatonism. But one of the books is called the Asclepius. And the entire book is about how to indwell spirits into statuary, which we do believe. So it ties back with Harry Potter, the Horcrux, the
Right.
idea that you can take an inanimate object and you can make it the dwelling place of a non-material spiritual entity. You can do that through an act of ritual. Well, if that is possible, which from our Orthodox perspective is possible, people do that. Well, then it is conceivable that a group of, let's say, theoretically, there are Satanists out there that desire to animate and give the AI over to an entity that can operate it. Well, it makes sense then. I use the framework of calling it the cybernetic skeleton of Satan, because Satan is not omnipresent, he's not omnipotent, and he's not even immortal. I mean, he's eventually going to enter in hellfire after Christ comes. So, how can he attain these attributes that we typically associate with God? It's possible. This is my personal theory, so don't put this on any saint or elder. This is me speaking.
I am
It's
seconding your
possible
theory. Go on.
it's possible that the AI system becomes the dwelling place of Satan himself, and that the Antichrist could be a transhuman, and that he will be worshiped as God incarnate because he will have access to your bank account. He could open your garage door. He knows protest in Rio de Janeiro. He knows the economics in Beijing, all at the split of a moment. And he can
So,
have access to all of that.
what I've called it colloquially for the longest time is a digital Ouija board.
Yeah.
That's how I view this. I'm not saying that all AI is bad. I use it for research on occasion. You
Yeah.
can't do a Google search these days without having an AI overview, so we're all using it. I would
Yep.
even argue that Google searches prior to the advent of AI was AI, right? So,
Right.
it's I don't think it's evil in itself. I think the abilities that they will have with it are evil, and what they want to do with it is evil, and it gives demons and perhaps Satan himself that false omnipresence. And when you look at the belief of those in Silicon Valley who are absolutely at the upper echelons Satanists, whether they practice Satanism as a religion or not, they are Gnostics, and they,
Yep.
as Tim Dillon says, they're trying to summon an ancient Sumerian god through
Seems
their
like it.
tech. That is what these people believe. When you look at the Epstein class and the fact that they are practicing, a Babylonian religion,
Yeah.
trying to return humanity to the Tower of Baal,
Yep.
that is what AI is going to enable them to do in practice.
Yes.
So.
Absolutely. You just nailed the whole thesis of my book. That's exactly what I argue, is that it is the new Tower of Babel. Babel is representative of man's existential desire to attain divinity without the help of God. And that's exactly what they're doing. And it's all kind of out in the open if you're able to see it. Sometime, maybe we're all in our own cocoon and we just are all seeing the same thing, you, myself, and other people come. But it feels, as you mentioned, when you put on the lens of the Orthodox phronema, one of the most astonishing things is that aspects of geopolitics and world history begin to fit into places that you would never have expected. And you can actually see the world more clearly. Now, if you take Christ healing the blind seriously, if you are engaging with Christ, he will give you ears to hear and eyes to see. The closer you are to Christ, the more discernment you have. And that's what every Christian's journey is as you grow closer to Christ, you literally see more of reality than what you did before. And that's part of our theotic journey, theosis, becoming more and more like Christ. Connecting this back to the prophecies in America, I will say that we just highlighted. So America is going to have a civil war, economic collapse, geological event. It's believed by some of the elders and saints that this could be mass casualties in the United States. However, here's the optimistic note. Multiple saints have highlighted, and also Elder Ephraim believed this to be the case. That's why he founded the monasteries, is that after the Great World War, after all of this stuff unfolds and America goes through its own tribulation, the people who survive will be incredibly pious. And they say that America will actually be a spiritual exemplar for the world, because those that actually pass through this needle and exist on the other side will do so due to the grace of God and their relationship. So that is the optimistic note. So America essentially is going to be judged by God. We will have to atone for the national sins, of which then individually we've been complicit in one way or another. And at the end of that, essentially we'll be purified. But it's not going to be easy, and it's not necessarily going to be pleasant as well. So again, how do you prepare for that? I don't know. I would recommend you start praying. I recommend you get in line with Christ and then do what you can with the means that you have in regards to trying to make your life as anti-fragile as possible.
Yep, go visit one of Elder Ephraim's monasteries. I brought them up
There
on
you
screen
go.
before while you were talking about it. You can just look it up. There are, I think you said 20, but I think there's 19 across the country. So,
Oh, okay, 19.
yes, so please do look that up and
I
visit
think
one of
there's one
them.
in Canada, isn't there?
Uh, I'm not
Yeah, I
sure.
think he has one in Canada.
Right. Very, very, very highly recommended. I will say
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Because this is an elder who foresaw so much of what is coming and prepared. It's quite rare that you would have a monk that lives on Mount Athos leave that life to go and build monasteries somewhere like America. Like it just doesn't really happen.
No.
A little humble monk that barely breathes a word of English going and building the 19 monasteries.
Yeah.
Like it just,
Absolutely. And
it's,
nobody knew why he was doing it.
yeah, yeah. So very, very important for people
To a
watching.
country he's never been to.
Yeah,
Imagine that.
yeah. So briefly, World War III, it's saying about lasting about 2 years, Russia to Mount Tabor.
Hmm.
A global blackout follows. Finland will be subjected to a nuclear strike by the
Well,
looks
this
of
is
it.
really interesting. I don't know if you saw this. This was just within the last week that Russia has called out Finland for having nuclear weapons. Now, I think they're American nukes, but they caught all these drone operations being flown out of some of these Eastern European nations and Finland in particular. And so I'm sure if somebody did an internet search, you would find Russia threatening war against Finland if they don't stop what they're doing. Which Finland, as I said, they have a U.S. Air Force base. I believe they have nuclear weapons there in the nation already. So this is really interesting. Now, God forbid that to happen. Nobody is encouraging any of this stuff. Again, it's all due to the collective sin of humanity and what we've done to the world, essentially. Um, but
Yeah, we should be
with those
grateful that
late,
our fate isn't Sodom and Gomorrah, honestly.
yeah, yeah. For some people that it may be, depending on where they're at in their spiritual journey. But yeah, thank God. Um, and so based on these latest news that I was reading, this is really interesting because if Russia is already calling out Finland as an existential nuclear threat to
Wow.
them, well, now we can see a basis for a potential retaliation. And Finland has been participating in the Ukraine war against the wishes of Russia.
Right, right. So many moving pieces. There is also the betrayal of China. So China
Yes.
betrays Russia for Siberia, the greatest bribe in history. Elder Athanasius of Evia in 2008 said, only one thing will break the Russians: betrayal by the Chinese, lured by control over all of Siberia. And the
Hmm.
end would come through Russia, said Saint Seraphim of Sarov in 1833.
Yep. So I asked Professor Jiang Shui Tin, he is the Predictive History YouTube channel. He came on because he was fascinated with Orthodox eschatology. He had watched a few of my streams and he believed that they correlated with some of his game theory that he uses to analyze geopolitics. And at the end of the stream, I asked him a question that was specific to the CCP because he acted as if he had watched these streams and was very familiar with some of these Orthodox prophecies. So I said, well, are you familiar with the fact that on Chinese maps, there's disputed territory that on an international map shows it's Russian territory? That on a Chinese map, the CCP has already highlighted that it is theirs. Now, China is an energy dependent nation, right? That's one of the biggest weaknesses of China itself is that they don't have their own energy. It's one of the reasons why they try to use solar um, and again, big on coal, but that's why the Iran war right now and the closing of the Strait of Hormuz is so detrimental to China. So, how does China then betray Russia? Well, it has to do with access to energy resources. Because Russia is going to be spread fighting these global battles, and they are going to be in a temporary allyship with China. China, it's believed that they're going to allow enemy forces to essentially gain the backside of the Russian front lines. And they're going to annihilate the Russian forces. And that China is going to allow this to happen because at that point, the war is going to be winding down. Things are going to, there's a predictive end to all of this stuff. And so they're going to allow the Russians to be slaughtered so that nobody will be able to defend the Chinese taking of Siberia, making them a much stronger nation because they'll have access to energy now. And when I
The
asked Professor Jiang about this, he wouldn't address it. So
Interesting.
I thought that was very interesting.
The World Economic Forum, I've spoken about this quite a few times, have said that by 2050, China will be the world's superpower. It's absolutely in their sights that China would rise to that level, and of course, Russia would be in the way.
Yes.
So this is it's all very interesting. I definitely see it as plausible. Again, hope it doesn't happen, but I definitely see it as plausible. Now, I don't mean to rush this, but I know that we're sort of on time already, so I just want to tell people we've already discussed the next phase, which is the Battle of Constantinople,
Mm-hmm.
3 days and 3 nights that will go on for, and at that point, not because the Russians want to hand it over, but it will just be out of necessity, I guess, that they hand
Right.
it over to
Yep.
Greece. And then it says when NATO, the friends of Turkey, descends to save her, then there the great conflict will happen. Then there is, after Constantinople is given to Greece, there is the sleeping general John, revealed by the archangel Michael, is crowned in Hagia Sophia. So this is what you were talking about before. I really urge people to not buy into this whole we're about to get raptured, which they can trick you through holograms, by the way, that has happened. And then you guys are left behind, and then they try and reveal some fake guy to us. Many antichrists will come claiming they're the Messiah. So I presume this will happen many times over. It's happening in Israel right now. There's another rabbi that said he's the Messiah. I mean, it happens all
Mm-hmm.
the time. But there is a time which you were talking about, a sort of golden time where people en masse return to orthodoxy, led under a king, King John, where and it seems kind of fantastical to a lot of people to hear this, but that those events will take place prior to the rise of the Antichrist. And from what I've
Correct.
heard, Patrick, is that it will be a time that is so full of human flourishing that people will sort of fall into decadence.
Yes.
And thus be primed because they've become so materialistic again, because everything is in abundance, that they are primed for the rise of Antichrist.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't have a whole lot more to say. I mean, I could get into the Saint John the Third, Ducas Vitatis, and his reigning. I think for the general audience, if you're interested in more of those deep dives, I'd be happy to discuss them. I'll be doing a stream in the future on it, but it may be a little bit too much for some people.
Well, I will be tuning in. I can assure you of that. Again,
I can explain it if you want me to the audience what the reign of the king is.
where
Yeah.
if you can do it very briefly, because again, I know we're going over time. I know you have a stream scheduled tonight. I don't want to take up
Mhm.
too much of your time, but do it very briefly.
Saint John the Third, Ducas Vitatis, was the emperor of Nicaea. So when the Catholics, the Latins, sacked Constantinople in 1204, the Byzantines were left without an empire. And so there was a series of kings or emperors that held what was referred to as the Empire of Nicaea, essentially the eastern half of the Byzantine Empire, part of Anatolia. And it's St. John Vatatzis that was able to sort of regain much of the Orthodox lands outside of Constantinople. He was a very devout man, a great Orthodox Christian, and a great warrior king. When he died, his son took over. And then by the time of his grandson, when he was 15, he was actually blinded by Michael Palaiologos, who reconquered Constantinople. There was a fight within the Byzantines of who's going to become the new emperor. So it's St. John Vatatz's lineage was actually killed off or married off by Michael Palaiologos, and that's why the church actually condemned him, despite him taking over Constantinople for what he did to Vatatzis's family. And we believe that he's the marble king. This is multiple saints of the church have spoke about his body being somewhere under Constantinople, and as the sheath and the sword is pulled out of the sheath, Elder Ephraim talked about how he will awaken and he'll be king again inside Constantinople, in which he never was. So it has to do with resurrection and divine providence and the relationship of the Byzantine Empire to God's will in history.
So at that point, we have a huge revival. People are going to be begging people to be talking about Christ. Again, those
Hmm.
that survive the coming times. I don't want to give like a false sense of security to people. The times we're entering are very, very turbulent and are going to be very difficult for a lot of people. So please do prepare. I'm not going to spend a whole heap of time talking about that because people know what my
Yeah.
message is. Become as self-sufficient as you possibly can.
Yep.
Don't rest on your laurels. These timelines as well are given as guides. We're not setting anything in stone here. But then we have a pan-heretical council of
Yes.
apostasy. Multiple saints warn of a false ecumenical council that will betray the Orthodox faith by uniting all religions under one roof, not to uphold truth, but to satisfy heretics. Now, ecumenism has been something that they've been working on for many, many years. And as you see, going back all the way to the war with Russia and Georgia, priming that way for Russia to come down and attack Turkey later, and these routes and these things happen over many, many years. Ecumenism is something they've been working very hard on. And when you are talking about world peace, it's something that everyone would love to see achieved. I
Right.
don't think we'll have it until, Christ finally returns. But not true lasting peace is what I'm saying. So when you have these ideas and a time of decadence where people are sort of primed for this, that is when that will happen. And then of course,
Hmm.
then at that point we have the Antichrist and the second
Hmm.
coming following that. So talk to us
Yep.
briefly about that.
Just quickly, so the false council, so orthodoxy is defined, generally speaking, or at least the first millennium faith is defined by what's referred to as the seven ecumenical councils. Just this defines the dogmas, the Christology, the ecclesiology, the Mariology, all this different stuff that is the tradition of the first 1,000 years of the Orthodox Church. It's believed that after this golden age, and as you said, where people are converting to orthodoxy en masse, there's going to be an attempt to create what we would perceive as the Antichrist religion. And the Antichrist religion isn't one religion. It's what we're already seeing with the Pope, sometimes referred to as Chrislam.
Yes.
There's an Abrahamic Faith Center in Abu Dhabi that has a Jewish synagogue, a Catholic church, and a Muslim mosque. And the idea is that all three of these traditions worship the same God. But do they? Christians should believe in a three-person, one essence Trinity, which is one God. The Muslims do not believe that Jesus Christ was God, but a prophet, and the Jews outright reject Christ as God and claim that he was a troublemaker.
Yes.
So from those three perspectives, clearly we don't worship the same God. The religion of Antichrist is the perennial religion. Perennial just means, all around. Um, that the all the faiths, Hinduism, Buddhism, Shintoism, are going to come to an agreement in the name of global peace that they all share a piece of the pie. They're all equally right. They have differences, but they're just cultural expressions towards the same general God, the general entity. And this is essential for who then the Antichrist will be placed as the fulfillment of that general God by these global world religions. It's only the faithful Orthodox that are going to be in opposition to this. And so, what the church elders have told us, and I know Father Peter Heers has spoke about this, is that when this false council occurs, the true church is the one that's going to deny it, because the vast majority of the world is going to be in favor of saying, yes, all the religions are equal. Yes, the Muslims are waiting for, the Christ to return. The Zionists, Christian Zionists are waiting for Christ to return. The Buddhists are waiting for their world teacher to return. The Hindus are waiting for their avatar to return. So it's interesting that so many of these world faiths are anticipating this being that's going to bring total unity and peace. And for them to all be consolidated together, this council, this global council, is going to affirm that this is the case. And they're going to use patriarchs and portions of the Orthodox Church to say that, well, the Orthodox Church is a part of this as well. So that is why it's so dangerous. That's why so many saints have said the greatest heresy of the modern period is ecumenism, the equating of orthodoxy with all the other world religions, essentially saying we all have different paths to the same mountaintop. We deny that explicitly.
Yeah, absolutely. We deny that explicitly. And you can't, um, to claim that all of Christianity is the same is flat out wrong. I of course love all people, including Protestants, but to claim that we're all the same is just not true. And there is only one Holy Spirit. He doesn't divide himself into different denominations and ideologies. He doesn't have a split personality disorder. So in this, it says, these are the worldly people, the heretics who abandoned the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church and recognized a new church. In this church, they do not fast, do not attend services, and do not receive Holy Communion. This was St. John of Kronstadt in 1908. And it says here, I wanted to show this to everyone, from the 1901 vision guided by St. Seraphim of Sarov, he saw a dark pseudo-church containing, quote, a star on the holy table instead of a cross, and a gospel with stars, new liturgical symbols replacing orthodox ones. Saint Seraphim told him this place is the abomination of desolation, which of course we see in the book of Daniel and we're warned about. And then following that, after 35 years of peace, the final apostasy, then Christ intervenes. And so where people can find this again is at eschatonvigil.org/timeline. I really encourage people to study it. And I know that you've done
they
streams.
update it regularly. So the Eschaton Vigil, when new things emerge, you can see that gets updated in real time. That's why the Khomeini stuff, like the timeline had been up for months before the Ayatollah was killed at the beginning of the Iran war. All that stuff's already been updated in here. So if you are interested in the unfolding of these events, do go orthodoxvigil.org/timeline and just keep it as a bookmark and refer to it. And when major events happen, always use this as a baseline to judge it against, because it's interesting how well the Orthodox elders and saints are batting right now in regards to global events that they themselves did not even live through.
Well, as I said to Michael Yon, the best geopolitical analysts you will find are the saints and elders of the Orthodox Church. So we should be paying attention to them. I want to direct everyone to your YouTube again, Church of the Eternal Logos. So informative. As you can see, Patrick knows all about transhumanism and geopolitical events, but also does this through an Orthodox Christian lens, which I think is absolutely vital. And also you can follow him on X, Dr. David Patrick Harry, PhD, or @_DP Harry. By the way, a lot of difficulty finding you, even typing that in perfectly. So just, it's crazy.
I got to create a new account. So my premium subscription for X ends the end of this month, I think the last day of April. And for one reason or another, my X account is massively shadow banned. You can't search me. The only way you can find me on X is if somebody retweeted something that I said and you follow them.
It's crazy.
Because it'll populate.
I'm having the same issues. That they just unfollowed last week. Over the last week, 1,000 people from my account because I was explaining how the war is leading to the Great Reset, and that's a big no-no. So, it's unbelievable to say that this is a free speech platform. As I've said from the start, it's not. It's crazy. It's a social credit.
I'm going to restart my whole account because unless you follow me, those are the only people that I can engage with. And half the people that follow me said they never even see me on X. So
that's crazy.
It's a waste. So I'm going to just create a new account.
I just wanted to also mention the books at Eschaton Vigil. I've spoken to people about this before, but if you actually go to the shop there, eschatonvigil.org/shop, Elders on the End Times, that's the book review that we did with Conrad. You also have Prophecies of St. Paisios, Visions of World War III, Russia Before the Second Coming, colossal, works here, guys. So much research into this. And then you have, of course, the second edition of the Eschatological Visions of the Blessed, which, that's the one that we did with Conrad. So highly recommend you support these guys. They do incredible work. Are there any other links or anything that you want to mention? Where can people find your book?
You can get author signed copies at my website, davidpatrickharry.com, or you can just get them through Amazon. Search Return to Babylon. It should populate. It should be the first book that pops up. So book, if you're a man out there, I'm sorry, ladies, but we have a men's only community. If you're a man and you'd be interested in joining a community of guys that are following these things regularly and then talking about them every other week, we do 1 week of education of whatever we're reading. Then the next week is a group discussion on anything people want to get into. So I have tons of exclusive content, study guides. I do streams regularly. I'm going to be doing a stream tonight on an Orthodox overview of the Crusades, 1 through 4, and how the Crusades aren't what you think they are, at least from the Byzantine Eastern Orthodox perspective. And I put study guides together. All that stuff's on the men's community, the Logos Academy, school.com/Logos Academy, and then YouTube, Church of the Eternal Logos, and then Instagram. Luckily, I'm not shadow banned there, at DPHARRY. You can find my Instagram.
Dr. David Patrick Harry, we are so grateful for your time today. Thank you for everything that you do. And I'm sure we'll be speaking again in the near future. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and I'd love to.
The New World Order has openly declared war on the free people of the world, and now they're telling us to expect catastrophic cyber attacks over the next 2 years. Weather events, no power, grids down, mobile cell services out. Contact your loved ones anywhere, anytime with the satellite phone store. The Bivy is a revolutionary GPS-based device which allows you to send SMS messages via your phone even if you have no mobile or cell service. Galileo will ensure you always stay in contact with Z Media, other trusted information sources, and your loved ones that can update you in real time in the event of an emergency. Don't be caught out and unprepared for the unprecedented times we are living in. Stay 10 steps ahead through secure, encrypted communication. Visit sat123.com/Maria and prepare yourself and your loved ones now.